Hello and welcome to the Atheist Half Hour with Michael Fulford from the New Covenant Studios in Pensacola, Florida. Uh, just getting started here. First show. One thing I'd like to talk about today is one thing whenever somebody finds out I'm an atheist, one of the first questions I get right after how can you justify your morality is, how can you justify having a life, or how can you enjoy life without God? And that always throws me because even when I was a theist, my joy in life never came from God. It always came from the people I was around, from the things I was around. But I always get, well, if you don't have forever, then how, nothing else matters, right? Because everything else is finite. And I was listening to the Atheist Experience. The fellow had a good example there. Matt Dillahunty had a good example there. He compared it to, if you get the chance to go to a performance by your favorite rock musician, well, that's going to be over in a few hours. So really, it doesn't matter, does it? Well, no, it matters. You want to go to a show. You probably end up picking out more clothing than you really want to wear. You want to make sure you have a camera. You want to make sure your friends are there. You want to have the experiences and the memories and to share and talk about forever, or as long as you can. And that's what life is. Life is about the experiences. It's making things, making memories and things you can share with other people and talk to other people about. And if you're like me, you try to find a way to make them funny and tell them to other people and in a way that they enjoy hearing about. So to hear someone say, well, I just can't enjoy life without a God or some kind of concept of eternity. Well, in that case, really you end up wasting life because you only have one chance at it. And for me at least, I got to admit, I end up, kind of looking at all the things I can do in life and all the possibilities and all the people I can meet. And at times it makes me just kind of stop, especially as I get older and become more aware of the opportunities I have and the opportunities I've left behind. It gets overwhelming at times. I've met so many amazing people within just the past 2 years of really getting involved and starting to step out into the world. I can't imagine another 50, 60 or 100 years. I'm shooting for 1,000, but I'm going to shoot low at the moment, say it that, just 100 years of meeting new, interesting, fascinating people and traveling to new locations and to boldly go where I've never gone before. And I just can't, at times it just overwhelms me, and I just can't even think about going forward. And to hear somebody say, well, but that's only temporary, that's only finite. I mean, one day you'll die, and then, you just think there's nothing after that? Well, I don't want anything after that. I've not heard a concept of eternity that sounds worth having. All the different versions of reality or versions of the afterlife I've heard, well, from a non-religious version, there's the one where you just hang out as a ghost. And I'm sure it's fun to sneak up on people while they're in the shower or while they're walking around their house. After a while, it probably would get kind of boring. You sneak up on the 100th person, and after a while, it's boring. But even the concept of the afterlife I've heard, the Christian heaven, well, a lot of those definitions don't sound that great. Eternity praising a great and all-powerful being, that doesn't sound like a lot of fun after a while. I've been told that one concept of heaven is where there's never a if only. It's always the best of everything. Well, that would get kind of numbing after a while, but even if it didn't, I know a lot of people who, even if I transferred to the right version of Christianity right now, I know a lot of people who would not get to that version of heaven. And there's no way for me that you can have an eternity of paradise without the people I care about. And the only way you could do that is by removing my memories of those people, but at that point it's no longer me. And there's other concepts, well, yeah, that's what happens. All of your personality is removed when you go to heaven. It's just this essence of you. Well, that's still not me. That's wiped away all of what made me me. Then you hear of other versions of the afterlife. You got Valhalla. You've got the Hindu idea or the Buddhist idea, and other ideas of reincarnation. But reincarnation is nice, but you don't end up remembering the person you are if it actually happens. I don't think it does, but if it did, You don't end up remembering who you were. Just this essence, eternal essence, is reborn into a new body. So to say that, you have to have that concept in order to make life worthwhile, really you end up wasting the time you have on this planet, in life, to do amazing things, or to keep your friends happy, your family happy, to tell new stories, to find new stories, to make new stories. And to me, after a while, it just becomes, how can you enjoy life if you're a theist? Because you end up if you think you have this extra chance, what matters this life? And I know many people who their whole life revolves around this concept of having this afterlife that they are working towards. Maybe their life was terrible, or maybe they've had bad things happen to them, and they have everything staked on this afterlife. And I don't want to remove that necessarily, but to be able to help them get beyond that, to be able to enjoy this life, to be able to enjoy the people in this life, to enjoy the things you can do, the people you can meet, and that's the biggest thing for me, is the people you can meet. That's what we should do, and that's what we should do as human beings. We only have this one life. We only have this one chance to make sure everyone has this opportunity of having the best life they can. And that goes into the next thing that I get asked all the time, which always follows that, well, how can you justify your morality? Well, for me, they always ask, well, they don't ask, how do you justify your morality? That's what they mean, but what almost always I get, well, how do you not rape, pillage, and murder? And I'm always left cold by that, because it is a failing in me, perhaps. I can never take it and think, oh, they really mean that. They can't really mean that. There's no way they actually think that way to me. It has to be that's how they, no, people don't really think that way. And maybe that's a failing. Maybe they really do think that way. But, for me, the justification is not to stop myself from doing a bad thing. The justification would have to be, what reason would I have to do these things? What cause do I have to do those things? And when your basis is to want to help other people, to make other people have a good life, or to help them have as good a time as possible, you have to be able to justify causing somebody harm. And we will talk about, we have wars, we have times of scarcity, of famine, of poor economy, and you can justify things maybe at that time, amoral situations where it's you or somebody else, or in my case, someone you care about needs to survive versus somebody else you don't know. But even then, you have to have a really good reason for me to justify causing somebody harm. And yet, when I run into these people, the thing is not, we have these problems, and we try to work around, we try to make the world better for everybody. It's instead, we must adhere to these doctrines, or else if we did not have these doctrines, we would be terrible people. And I cannot see that. I've known people, or you interact with people who you suspect are sociopathic or psychopathic, and I've not found, and I've not seen anything that would really make me believe otherwise, to this point at least, that having religious rules help people who are truly sociopathic or psychopathic and think in behaving better. Instead, they use those rules in order to better control other people, or to better further their own goals. Humans are born with an empathic ability, and we understand it through science, we understand it through the study of human condition, without having to have a God figure put in to make us feel the pain of other people, or make us understand the pain of other people. And to try to shove that feeling aside and say, no, maybe you don't like what they're doing, but these laws in this book say that this is both religious laws and laws. These laws in this book tell us that no, you can't do that, or no, there's a reason for this, or you should allow this. You end up hurting more people than you help, surely. Most recently, we have the homosexual fight for equal rights here in the U.S., and women as well, and other groups that were not necessarily as affected through religion necessarily, but where they were fighting for equal rights. And in the case of women and homosexuals, both of those were, their lack of equal rights were justified through the holy book of a religion. And we were not supposed to question that. We were not supposed to say, no, this is wrong, because if you question it, you'll question all these other things, like, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, or, thou shalt not wear mixed fibers, all these other things that you should never question. The thing is, you need to question them. I follow a philosophy now called humanism. It's a secular philosophy. The idea is that it's a philosophy informed by science, informed by our own sense of morality, and it evolves over time. It has to. We know more things than we did thousands of years ago, and how we interact with other people, and how what we do hurts other people, or how it can hurt other people. And we have to continue to adjust our actions as we learn new things about how to interact with other people. Otherwise, we won't improve. Things don't get better. We can see that in where societies have stagnated in the Middle East or in other parts of the world, where when societies have just stopped and the rest of the world continues, conflict emerges. People start causing harm. They hurt other people, and the society itself becomes more problematic instead of adapting to the new situation they find themselves in. And if you try to hold yourself to a book that was written thousands of years ago for a culture that was living in a tribal culture, and try to take it to modern day, yeah, there were good ideas in there. There were good ideas in every culture on how to live, how to interact with other people. Were they perfect? No. Were they intended to be perfect? Of course not, no matter what they said about them being inspired by God or not. They were intended for the culture of the time. And then as cultures have progressed, as we begin to understand that that person here and that person in the next valley over is as much a person as my brother here to the left of me, we began to adjust our morality. And really one of the biggest changes in morality over the thousands of years that we've been around, million year, but the thousands of years of culture, has been to recognize that the people across the lake or the river or on the other side of the world now, they are people just like we are. They have families, they have friends, they have things they care about. They have bad jokes, they have good jokes, not as often, but it happens. And to be able to recognize that and interact that into our society, that is what morality is, to be able to adjust ourselves, to want to care for other people, to recognize that other people need help, and to find ways how we can go about helping them. If you just take this book and all the whatever book that may be, and just say these are how we will treat other people, regardless of what we may know about causing harm or helping them, then we will not progress as a society, and we will look to the Middle East and we will see what our future will be. So, as an atheist, when I hear someone ask me how can I justify my morality or how I can justify enjoying life, those are the things that go through my head, and that's without looking to the horrible things that have been done in the name of religion. Because it is true, you can say that there are atheists who have done many bad things, and there have been atheists who have done bad things just as bad, or in some instances worse, than religion. I think it's a matter of tools more than philosophy. But just as an example, there is no teaching in atheism itself that says homosexuals are bad. There are teachings in the Christian and Muslim and Jewish faith that say homosexuals are bad. And in the modern era today, there is a country that is made up predominantly of Christians, not the U.S., though we didn't exactly have a good history there, neither did the UK. But in Uganda, they are planning a bill, or have tried repeatedly to push a bill, which has been named in the U.S. the Kill the Gays bill, where if a person is caught being homosexual, and how do you get caught being homosexual? Apparently they need to walk in on them while they're in their bedroom, which should be a private place to me. But if they're caught being homosexual, they will be arrested. If they're caught again, they would be killed. And we have businesses in the U.S. who were hoping to help that bill go through. And when those businesses were named instead of the moral outrage, which I would expect, because the whole point, if you're going to, it's fine to use your ability to affect other cultures if you have the ability, I suppose, but, it's a Christian viewpoint, fine, push your Christian viewpoint, but the viewpoint was that homosexuals should be killed. And they based that off of their Christian morality. So when I'm asked where does my morality come from, I always have to wonder, where does your morality come from? Now, how do you justify not having slaves? There's nothing in the book about that. How do you justify having women on equal footing to you? Nothing in the book about that. In fact, in the Old Testament, it's very strictly to the Jews. New Testament, Jesus very rarely will speak to anybody who's not of Jewish descent. It's not till Paul we get to where it starts to open up to everybody else. But how do you justify having any sense of morality when your book is what dictates how you behave, how you interact with people, how you care for other people? And I'm always stumped when they ask me those questions, not because I don't have an answer. I have many answers and many reasons why I do what I do and enjoy the conversation. I'm stumped because almost always the phrase is, well, how do you justify not having slaves, or how do you justify not causing harm to somebody? And I just don't, for starters, I just don't think that way, and I don't think they think that way. They can't think that way. If they thought that way, they would act that way. And that's one of the greatest harms to me, is the idea that comes to us from Christianity, the idea that the idea that humans are evil, not just flawed, or not just, in my opinion, humans are learning and we improve and we are doing much better than we did 50 years ago, a century ago, in terms of how we interact with other people. But the idea that humans are at their basest evil and full of sin. And I do believe we have seen the effect of that teaching in Christian countries with the way they treat other people as well. In the Scandinavian countries, where we see how they treat prisoners in a way that's meant towards rehabilitation, whereas here in the U.S. we treat prisoners with punishment, and we can see from a scientific standpoint, in the sense of by looking to see what happens, that in the Scandinavian countries, as peaceful and as rewarding as these prisons seem to be, they have a very low rearrest rate there. Whereas in the U.S., if you're arrested, you're likely to be arrested again. So the mindset of, well, humans are evil, or humans are full of sin and need to be punished, you end up with this system that punishes people who need help, or punishes people who could be rehabilitated. And it's more complicated than that. I understand we have the way our prison system is set up in the U.S. is one that actively makes money off of having people in jail, so you have a justification there. But the whole whole reason that came about was the idea that if someone does wrong, they need to be punished, not rehabilitated, not finding out what caused them to do the wrong thing, but to be punished. And to be the idea of eye for an eye. You have done this wrong, I will take that wrong out from your skin. or from your time. And, so to say these things, to say, well, how can you justify your morality? I was raised in a evangelical school. I went to a Catholic church with my mother. I went to a Methodist church with my grandparents. All of it was, and I mean, it's not like I had a bad experience doing it, but I found over time that if I want to help people, if I want to go and actually help people who need the help, I can't do that through religion. If I tried to do it through religion, I've met people who are in the LGBTQ community. I have met people who may have done things that were questionable from their point of view of their church, who I've helped, or things that or I've met people who their church has just abandoned them. And for whatever reasons, they stepped outside the bounds of their religion in some way, and the church has just writes them off. Or maybe they've not stepped outside the bounds of their religion. So, at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, what is morality? To me, morality is trying to increase the amount of good in the world. And I've actually come to the point where I've seen that churches or people who are religious will work against that. Especially if it's not their since it's usually not their definition of good. And when I run into that, and then again to hear, how can you justify being a moral being? And they say it to me straight to my face. They look me in the eye and they say, how can you justify being a moral being? And there is a point where I just wanted to shout back, well, how can you? You sit in the church, you say your prayers, and then you go home and you don't help the people who need the help, or you're not there for the people who need them. And at the end of the day, who is more moral? The person who does things because they want to and they want to help, or the person who does it because they have this dangling reward of eternal life afterwards? So, anyway. Okay.